Uh, Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sure you're gonna be telling us a lot of how much you were impressed by the speech and how much you liked every word President Biden said, and that you agree with every word and sentence.
I agree with his choice of poetry.
Oh yeah, tell us more.
The Second Coming by Yeats. It's a fantastic poem.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why he chose it.
Why do you think?
Well, he refuted the poem, but the poem is a pretty good description of the moment. And there are two lines that he didn't quote. One is that he describes this terrible situation, and then he says, "What rough beast is slouching toward Bethlehem?" So I think when we look at what's going on in the Middle East, we have to ask what rough beast is slouching toward Bethlehem? And of course, it's Iran.
Yeah, but
which didn't get enough attention.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to get from you really like big picture take on what we just saw, and how and whether you saw in the speech any attempt by Biden to lay out some sort of a legacy.
Yeah, no, certainly I did. I mean, you're right with your initial comment. I'm going to be a Debbie Downer here. It's a shame to start with a downer right at the beginning, but no, I mean it's very poignant. As he mentioned, he had to step down. I don't think he made that decision comfortably. So
it's not about. So he didn't step down, as he said, in order to send a message to the world about the importance of democracy.
No, so it's very, very poignant, dear. It's very poignant. I mean, on a personal level, it's almost tragic. And then there are the ideas that he expressed, and I'm sure that he's sincere in the ideas. He wanted to go down in history as a peacemaker, and he has ideas about how to bring peace to the world. But I think those ideas are failing. And you felt it as he went through the different issues, especially on the Middle East, but also on Ukraine. I don't think most people looking at Ukraine think that Russia is losing or that Russia has been stopped and that Ukraine is necessarily going to be victorious. They stopped the Russian armies at a certain point, but Russia is within reach of turning Ukraine into a failed state, of turning it into Mongolia, a landlocked country completely dependent on the West for survival, which is what Putin wants.
But so let's take a step back on this one and say, like, if I told you 4 years ago that Russia is going to invade Ukraine, and the U.S. response to such an invasion, the U.S. and the international response, and now we know what happened. Do you think that, in retrospect, Biden, as he tried to lay out here, managed to unite NATO and the West and strengthen NATO, and that basically Putin failed in his attempt to overrun Ukraine and maybe other countries?
No, I think NATO has been strengthened. There's no doubt about that. In the sense that we have new members, there's a renewed sense of purpose and a renewed focus, and all of that is positive. But we have in the globe Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and then some of their other countries like Venezuela and so on. But the core three, China, Russia, Iran, they're on the rise, and we feel that especially in your part of the world. So President Biden wants Afghanistan to be the sign. He said, "I wanted to bring these wars to an end." So he certainly brought Americans home, and he scaled back American military deployment in certain parts of the world. But there isn't a sense that has brought about a more peaceful world at all. So that's a message that may resonate to some in domestic American politics. But if you're sitting in Tokyo or you're sitting in Seoul or in Jerusalem, none of America's allies that are on the front line against Russia, China, Iran, if you're sitting in Kyiv, feel like they're in a safer world now as a result.
Yeah, let's talk about China for a second. I have to say that I was a bit surprised that, I mean, he touched on China, but it was relatively short. I thought there's going to be much more China, in the speech. I'll ask John Feiner later why was it so short. But so, what did you think about the China part of the speech?
Well, I agree with you. He didn't really touch on it because there's still hope that they can constructively engage China. They don't want to they don't want to antagonize it, and they are really feeling it right now in Europe and in the Middle East. And so he prefers to just kind of paper over all of it. But
So you think this was intentional to say, we're in the middle of something. I don't want to do something to jeopardize what I'm trying to do until January 20th. So I'll just, say some generic.
The less said, the better. The less said, the better.
Yeah. And how do you think people if you're Xi and you're watching this, what's Xi's take?
I'm sure that he understands it very, very well. He understands. She has a problem in that his economy is doing very badly. So it isn't simply a question. It's a more nuanced picture than what I suggested a minute ago. It's not simply Russia, China, Iran, new axis on the rise, new Cold War. It's much more complex than that. But she is very much aware of the leverage that he has over the West and over Biden, even while he has certain vulnerabilities.
Let's move to another part of the speech, which is obviously
I want to bring you to your part of the world.
No, that's I'm getting there, and you're right that I was also like the China part, also the Iran part was pretty short, like sentence or something, or like sentence and a half.
Because they have a thesis that has been totally refuted by events. And their thesis is that you can stabilize the Middle East by engaging Iran directly in negotiation, and by treating each proxy of Iran, each proxy arena, as a separate and disconnected arena in which we can work on the specific grievances in that arena. So in Gaza, we try to come up with a deal between Hamas and Israel. In Lebanon, we try to come up with a deal between Hezbollah and Israel. And he says it's not in anyone's interest that we have this conflict. But Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, told us last week, Israel, no matter what you do, no matter how strong you are, no matter how many blows you successfully land against us, we are not going to let you stabilize the north of your country. That's his interest. And that's because he is working for Iran. So the problem in the region, the thing that connects all of the fronts, is Iran. But that refutes their whole thesis, which is that we can stabilize the region by working with Iran.
And we're almost a year in to the crisis in the Middle East, and it seems that again, if I told you a year ago there's going to be a 1-year war in the Middle East, going to start with Gaza, then Lebanon, Iran, the Houthis, militias in Iraq. Did I miss something? I don't know. But you would tell me I'm crazy?
I wouldn't have believed it. In 1956, Israel conquered Gaza and the entire Sinai in less than 8 days. And so we're well past 8 months, and we still don't have a total control of Gaza. It's amazing.
And
that was a much smaller and weaker Israel too.
And do you think that, again, if we try to take look at the big picture here, do you think that, because for example, President Trump says, if October 7th would never happen if I'm president. Okay, that's his main policy point on the last year of the war in Gaza. But do you think that, again, Biden could have stopped this from happening?
I think they have the wrong. I think they have the wrong. Look, October 7th caught everyone by surprise. It caught me by surprise. I assume it caught you by surprise. The Israelis, the American national security establishment, nobody saw it coming. I wouldn't. If Donald Trump had been in power, he may have seen it as well. Definitely possible. But Biden has defined the problem from day one as a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And he has the solution to the conflict is, as he went, two-state solution, two peoples living side by side in peace, blah, 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 blah. It's not a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It is an Iran-Israel conflict. And that's an objective fact because the Houthis are involved. Hezbollah opened up on, as he mentioned, unprovoked on October 8th. So it's Iran versus Israel. I actually think it's Iran versus the United States. If you frame it that way, then that leads to totally different understanding of what the solutions are. The solution is to deter Iran, not to come up with a deal where we can get Sinwar to agree with Netanyahu.
So if, let's say, that in 2 months Donald Trump is the president-elect, and you get a call from his people and tell you, Mike, listen, come in. Trump wants to consult with you on national security, which is something that we all know Trump is doing all the time because he's very interested in this issue. But he calls you in and tells you, what do you think I should do? Then what would be your advice?
I would say
what's the first thing to do on January 20th on this issue?
The first thing to do is number one, hold Iran responsible for what it does and for what its proxies do. So Iran is responsible for what the Houthis do, and that there will be direct, immediate, and significant penalties to Iran for both its behavior and its proxies. Number two, Palestinians do not get a veto over Israeli security relations with anyone else in the region. And number three, there have to be enough U.S. troops in the Middle East permanently to make your military threat against Iran credible. I'm not saying that Americans need to go to war at all, but the Americans are there to backstop, say, the Israelis. If the Israelis want to carry out a reprisal against the Iranians, then they have escalation dominance because the Americans are behind them.
But isn't the third point is when he kicks you out of the room and tells you, I'm not sending more troops to the Middle East?
No, he says, Mike, thank you very much. He says, thank you very much. Can I plus up the troops in the Middle East in such a way that it will not cause me any pain in domestic politics? And I would say, yes, let's talk to your military advisors about that, and we can come up with a formula so that it will not even be noticed. It needs to be noticed in Tehran. And look at what President Biden told us, that this direct negotiation with Iran and trying to reach a deal with them is going to lead to many fewer American troops in the Middle East. But what happened? What happened is that we had a massive escalation in the Middle East because of Iran, and we had to pull all of these troops out of East Asia and bring them to the Middle East. It's much better if you have a smaller but more lethal force in the Middle East that can pose a constant, credible threat to Iran.
I want to ask you about another thing, because Biden mentioned in the speech again that Israel and Hamas need to take the deal that's on the table and end the war, release the hostages, all of that. Trump barely spoke about this issue, like the hostages, or he just said that need to get the Gaza war over with fast. That was like maybe the only thing he said. If again he calls you in and asks you, Mike, what should I do with this Gaza thing? What would you tell him?
All roads lead to Tehran. You start with the Iranians and Hezbollah, and then you cut the deal with you work on the deal with the Palestinians.
So and on the hostage issue,
same thing. I mean, this is the deal with the Palestinians. So as long as Sinwar thinks that Iran is going to pull Israel into a regional war, he's not going to cut a deal.
Yeah. Let's talk about the final message in the speech, which at least I found strange that it was at the end of the speech and not at the beginning, because it felt to me like this is what Biden wanted his main message of the speech to be, which is the part about democracy and how leaders should work for the people, not for themselves, and while bringing his own example of stepping down. Do you think that when other members of other countries were sitting in the room listening to Biden and knowing that Donald Trump could be here next year, what did they think about what might Donald Trump say about democracy in the world?
So this is the UN. I mean, what percentage of these guys are from democracies? They sat there and they heard that and they said, "Oh, the Americans are talking about democracy again." And they look at their watch. There's not. I don't think any of that rhetoric. I don't think any of that rhetoric resonated with those people in that room.
So you think that next year, if
the LGBTQ rights in Africa, did that resonate with the leaders of the African countries?
No, so I'm asking if next year it's Donald Trump, and he doesn't deal with all this democracy stuff, but just say his own thing. You think it will resonate more with countries around the world?
I think there's a certain level of American rhetorical flourish that everyone is used to hearing. And every one of them is going to look at America and look at what its policies are toward their particular part of the world and ask whether this is benefiting me or not.
Mike Doran, thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us here, and thank you for giving your take on Biden's speech.
Thank you
very much.